Sri Lanka didn't lose a war. It lost its economy. And in just a few years, a country went from stable growth to total collapse. Not long ago, Sri Lanka was considered a rising economy in South Asia. Tourism was booming, foreign money was flowing in, and the future looked stable. But today, it's remembered as the country where people stormed the presidential palace because they couldn't afford fuel or food. So how did an entire economy fall apart so fast? And more importantly, could this happen somewhere else? Stay with me, because the real reasons behind Sri Lanka's collapse are far more complex and far more dangerous than most people realize. For decades, Sri Lanka looked like a success story. After ending a long civil war in 2009, the country entered a period of optimism. Infrastructure projects exploded across the island. New highways, ports, airports, and cities promised a modern future. Economic growth averaged around 5%. Poverty rates declined, and Sri Lanka officially became a middle-income country. But beneath the surface, a dangerous illusion was forming. Sri Lanka wasn't growing because it was producing more. It was growing because it was borrowing more. The government financed massive projects using foreign loans instead of domestic revenue. The economy became dependent on tourism, remittances, and debt rather than strong exports or industrial production. It worked until it didn't. By the late 2000s, Sri Lanka's external debt had quietly ballooned to over $51 billion. And here's the key problem. Much of that debt was short-term and high interest. Instead of long-term development loans, Sri Lanka relied heavily on international sovereign bonds, commercial borrowing, foreign currency loans. That meant repayments came fast, and they came hard. Every year, billions of dollars had to be paid in foreign currency. To do that, Sri Lanka needed a steady inflow of dollars, and that inflow depended on tourism and exports, which brings us to the first crack in the system. In 2019, Sri Lanka was hit by a devastating blow. A series of terrorist attacks targeted churches and hotels across the country. Tourism collapsed almost overnight. Then, just as the country was struggling to recover, COVID-19 arrived. Borders closed, flights stopped, hotels emptied. Tourism, which generated more than 10% of Sri Lanka's foreign currency, practically vanished. At the same time, global trade slowed, and remittances from Sri Lankans abroad dropped. Dollars stopped flowing in, but debt payments didn't stop flowing out. In 2019, a new government came into power promising quick relief. And then it made one of the most disastrous economic decisions in Sri Lanka's history. Taxes were slashed. Value-added tax was cut from 15% to 8%. Major taxes were abolished entirely. Government revenue collapsed by nearly 30%. The idea was simple: lower taxes, boost spending, stimulate growth. But in reality, Sri Lanka had no financial cushion to absorb the loss. Less revenue meant bigger budget deficits, more borrowing, more pressure on foreign reserves. It was like punching holes in a sinking ship and hoping it wouldn't flood. Then came one of the most controversial decisions of all. In 2021, the government announced a sudden ban on chemical fertilizers, forcing the entire country to shift to organic farming overnight. The intention sounded noble: healthier food, greener agriculture, fewer imports. But the execution was catastrophic. Farmers weren't prepared, alternatives weren't available, crop yields collapsed, rice production fell sharply. Tea exports, Sri Lanka's biggest export, declined. Instead of exporting food, Sri Lanka now had to import it, spending precious foreign currency it no longer had. This single policy move turned a fragile economy into a free fall. By early 2022, Sri Lanka faced an impossible equation. No dollars coming in. Billions owed in foreign debt. Empty foreign currency reserves. The central bank tried to defend the currency. The government tried to delay payments. But the math no longer worked. Sri Lanka was running out of money, literally. When the foreign reserves dropped below $50 million, the consequences hit ordinary people first. Fuel shipments stopped. Gas disappeared from stores. Power cuts lasted up to 12 hours a day. Hospitals ran low on essential medicines. Food prices exploded. Inflation surged past 70%, and food inflation went even higher. For many families, survival became a daily calculation. Do we buy food or fuel? Do we travel to work or save money? The economy wasn't just failing on paper. It was failing in kitchens, hospitals, and streets. In April 2022, Sri Lanka made a historic announcement. It suspended all foreign debt repayments. For the first time in its history, the country officially defaulted. Credit ratings collapsed. International markets panicked. Imports became even harder to finance. But the real explosion wasn't in the markets. It was in the streets. As shortages worsened, public anger reached a breaking point. Mass protests erupted across the country. People didn't chant slogans. They demanded fuel, food, and electricity. Eventually, crowds stormed government buildings and occupied the presidential palace. The president fled the country. A financial crisis had turned into a political collapse, and the world watched as a modern economy fell apart in real time. This was the moment Sri Lanka's crisis stopped being a national story and became a global warning, because nothing about this collapse was sudden. It wasn't caused by a single disaster. It wasn't caused by one loan or one country. It was caused by years of debt-driven growth, political populism, poor economic planning, delayed reforms. Sri Lanka didn't fall because it was unlucky. It fell because its system was fragile, and fragility always breaks eventually. Today, Sri Lanka is slowly rebuilding. With help from the International Monetary Fund, inflation has come down, the currency has stabilized, and tourism is cautiously returning. But the damage is deep. Millions were pushed into poverty. Trust in institutions was shattered, and recovery will take years. Sri Lanka's collapse teaches a brutal lesson. Economic growth built on debt is not growth, it's a countdown. Cutting taxes without revenue destroys stability, and delaying reforms only makes the final crash worse. This wasn't just Sri Lanka's story. It's a warning to every country walking the same path. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and check out the channel to find more amazing and new videos.